So which politician is the violator of the week this week? Stay tuned, you'll find out. Plus, I'm going to teach you how you can catch these politicians just like I do. Thank you for watching. My name is Glen Morgan, and this is We the Govern. And we are going to talk about the violator of the week. And regular viewers probably are aware, one of the things I like to do is expose and catch politicians and PACs and judges and others who fail to follow Washington State's campaign finance laws or the ethics laws in this state. And it's not that hard. I've caught hundreds of them breaking the law, and many hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines have been issued, and litigation has ensued, and AG lawsuits have come about as a result of the work that I've done over the last few years. And you can see more details if you look down below. So basically, if you want to know how to do this, you got to become familiar with Washington State's Public Disclosure Commission websites, the pdc.wa.gov right here. This is a great website for any activist to get familiar with a lot of data and a lot of information that the politicians are required to submit, and what holds them accountable and what makes them at least semi-capable or likely, or at least have some level of desire to comply with the law, is that if they don't comply, they can be fined. And you as a citizen, just like me, can review these documents and see if they're compliant. And if they aren't, you can file a complaint and force the Public Disclosure Commission to do an investigation if it's there's some merit to it, and maybe you can get those politicians to just be a little bit more accountable. So today's violator of the week, it comes to us from the city of Burien, a city where we are no strangers because we seem to find a lot of problems there. They have elected some really terrible people to office frequently, and when you do that, you're more likely to find people who seem to like to violate the law. So specifically, the person I'm talking about here is former Burien City Councilwoman Krystal Marx. And she is dressed up in one of her favorite costumes. She likes to dress up like this to go down to riots in Seattle. As awesome as that is, she was even more impressive on the Burien City Council and didn't really do the city of Burien any favors while she was in office, which is why the voters in Burien did reject her last year and replaced her with somebody far superior, not that that's hard to find, and at least have somebody with some level of sanity in office in Burien, which they need much more of. Nevertheless, in addition to being really a terrible city councilwoman, Krystal Marx was also a lawbreaker. And in a complaint that I filed against her earlier this May, it turned out she was fined by the PDC $600. And there was enforcement action against her, and that's the fine that they've given her for failing to provide any of her financial affairs information, which all elected officials are required to do. That helps the public know if there's any conflicts of interest, or if they're getting rich while they're in office, or whatever other issues might be exposed by those financial affairs documents. It's been fairly important since 1972 for all politicians and many senior level bureaucrats to provide these documents. And of course, Krystal Marx didn't think the laws applied to her, and so she chose to ignore them. It's not the first time she was fined. She's been fined before in the past, but this is the most recent, and so that makes her the violator of the week. This is actually from a couple weeks ago, but I'm just kind of catching up here, so I wanted to make sure that you knew about it. Now, when it comes to that, the question is, how can you do the research that I essentially did to catch somebody like Krystal Marx breaking the law? And I hope to just explain that briefly here by using another example not far away with the Public Disclosure Commission, but not far away from the city of Burien in the city of Des Moines, which is just to the south of Burien. So if anybody, I grew up right next to Des Moines. I had cousins that lived there, and yes, in Washington State, if you're local, you tend to pronounce it Des Moines, not Des Moines. But that being said, they have a city council just like the city of Burien. And Anthony Martinelli was a local city councilman who was elected to office in 2019. And if you go back and you want to look at his campaign, you can see that he was endorsed by the King County Democrats, King County Young Democrats, SEIU, the usual suspects on the left-wing spectrum of the political process. So a Democrat in good standing, he got on the council and was elected, except that he had a few other problems. He was arrested last year for domestic violence, and then after that arrest, other people, former relationships apparently of his, came forward and also added to those allegations of domestic violence against him. And in the end, the mayor of Des Moines decided that was even too much for that city, and they just asked for him to resign, something that he did late January earlier this year. So it's understandable that as these issues, he was arrested, and obviously as it became more public and the thing got a little bit crazier, he finally decided that maybe it's not such a good idea to be in public office, and he did resign, which was probably a wise choice. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that his legal troubles are over. And I know that I have looked into this guy before, and the question is, since he had made the news recently, and I was just kind of following up on exactly where things were at, I went to my go-to standby, the pdc.wa.gov, went to their website, decided to look up Mr. Martinelli and see if he was actually in compliance with the law recently. And it turns out one of the things I like to do is go to the financial affairs section. You can kind of see here, it's one of the tabs on the PDC website if you want to dig up more information. So you can look to see, did they file their financial affairs documents and what they look like. And when you look down here at this list, you can see that he had filed several F1s, that's what they're called, these financial affairs documents. But the last one that he had filed was actually for 2020. And he was obligated early this year to file one for 2021, which is missing. Now, I always like to double check just to see if anybody else has filed the same complaint, because there's no point in filing the same one that somebody else has filed. And so even though he's missing his financial affairs report for 2021, I went back and I looked under the enforcement section, which is also a tab there, you can go look at it, to see if there were any cases pending against him. Now, there was a case closed from 2019 that I had filed against him that year for also failing to disclose financial affairs information back in the day. And although he did have that problem, they didn't really formally sanction him. They just gave him a formal reminder saying, an early young candidate, try to comply with the law next time. You didn't do it this time, but try to do it next time. And so that was how that one was resolved. But I also noticed the PDC staff had filed a complaint against him for the same thing that I just noticed in that search there under 2021, that he was missing that financial affairs document. However, PDC staff, while they may be filing a complaint against a politician like this, something they regularly do because that's a relatively easy complaint to do now, where they basically just take all the F1 filers, the people who are supposed to file those, and they just see who's late. And eventually staff, if they're not too buried with work, will catch up and they'll file complaints as kind of an automatic process, reminders first, and then eventually a complaint against the politician if they decide that they don't want to file it, which he appears to have gone down that fun road right now. But PDC staff will miss other things, and that's why you as a citizen, an investigative journalist, or an aspiring community member who just wants to be involved in your community, you can dig a little bit deeper and see what else they might be missing. And so remember this article back here, the person on the right here is a Burien City Councilmember named Sydney Moore, and she had been elected fairly recently, I think 2019 as well, to the Burien City Council, and she indicated in that article about her relationship with Martinelli, and in addition to the domestic abuse allegations that came out in the Seattle Times, it turns out if you look at her financial affairs document, which she was required to file, she had reported that Mr. Martinelli was actually paying her child support. What's unfortunate is that while she was reporting that and appears to have disclosed it, Mr. Martinelli did not, and he is obligated to report any debts or regular obligations that he has as an elected official. Child support would fall underneath that, and he was not reporting it. So there are two essential violations that you have here when you go to file a complaint against a guy like Anthony Martinelli, this former Democrat Des Moines City Council member. Number one is what the PDC staff has already filed, which is the failure to file financial affairs reports for 2021, which is a violation of RCW 4217A.700. But in addition, he also concealed personal assets. He also wasn't reporting his bank accounts and some other information. He doesn't have to say what's in his bank account, but he does have to kind of report that he has one, and he basically was saying that he didn't have one, and at least the reports that he's filed. So they're clearly inaccurate and incomplete, so he has to go back to 2019 and 2020 and also complete those, and that's a separate violation, which I detailed in the complaint that I filed. At the time I produced this video, that complaint hasn't posted yet, but this is how you do the research, and you could file the exact same complaint that I did against this guy. don't just duplicate the one I just did, but I mean, you can file this type of complaint against others just doing some basic research like I just described there. Now, I realize it's kind of a snapshot and it probably seems pretty quick, but that's basically all you have to do is do a little bit of research. And if you start to pay attention to who your elected officials are and what they're doing, there's all kinds of violations that inevitably you will find if you just look a little bit closer. I will try to do a video pretty soon. I have a number of other violations that people in PACs and groups that I've caught recently. That'll be the subject of a future video, but I'm hoping to try to teach people how to do the same thing that I've done, because it's really helpful if there's a lot more people out there digging into these things and looking at them. You never know what you'll find. So that's, I hope, enough for everybody to get a better sense of how to do this yourself, and hopefully this educates you a little bit more on the process with the Public Disclosure Commission and other issues. If you want to learn more, please go to wethegovern.com. Also, go to the website down below that I've linked. It has a list of the 205 politicians, PACs, judges, and others that have been sanctioned or fined based on the complaints that I filed. Just to give you an idea, you can go to the source documents there and get a sense of what those complaints would look like and what they result in over time. So that's what we have to do. We have to keep paying attention to what's happening, and inevitably the future belongs to those who show up, and I hope you're willing to show up for this one. Thank you for watching.